Hello and a warm welcome to Economic Forum. My name is Tawanda Gudlanga. And what has become the topical issue, the roller mill is what we are focusing on tonight. And we have from the Grain Millers Association of Zimbabwe, Mr. Tafadzwa Msarara, the chairman. Sir, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Roller mill has become the talking point, and what's even making it worse is the COVID-19 pandemic. But let's just take a few steps back. How much does Zimbabwe need in terms of maize?
Well, the annual consumption for commercial production, which is maize that we buy for processing into stock feeds and milling meal, it's about 1.1 million tons a year.
So when we talk about 1.1 million tons, obviously Zimbabwe has been facing ravaging droughts for 2 successive years. Obviously, we've been hit hard. What has been the deficit, and how much do we need to start planning to work on in order for us to feed the nation?
Well, if you look from 2016 when Command Agriculture came in, we had surplus. And at that particular time, there was also issues of poor rainfall, poor funding, and Command came in for, if the truth be told, we recorded a surplus. We could not even have enough silos. The government had to hire private silos to store the maize from Command Agriculture. Then fast forwarded to last year with the challenges, of course, of the drought, the cyclone coming in. And then the funding of the program became shaky. Inputs were not coming on time. Side marketing started, yields were poor. And this has brought us to where we are now.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the surplus. What happened to it?
Well, we consumed it. If you check, there's a correlation during that time between the growth in the egg production, in the chicken and livestock production, and the surplus we had, because there was no stock feeds to feed into that. And currently the rise in prices of meat and the milk and other products can be attributed now to reduction of farming of those products.
So what is the situation arising to date? How much do we need probably per month as a country in terms of maize consumption?
The demand itself fluctuates. It's seasonal. Normally, in a good farming season, there mustn't be high demand of milling at this time of the year, because harvest will be happening, and also we'll be having what we call the green harvest. Green harvest, you're talking of your mananga, mbambaira, and other products. But given the vagaries of weather that we started experiencing last year, we now need to send milling meal not only in the urban and peri-urban areas, but in the rural areas, especially in the southern part of the country. So demand currently stands between 3,500 to 4,000 tons a day.
3,500 to 4,000 tons a day. And what's our holding as a country in terms of maize?
Well, I can't say for security reasons, but it needs all hands on the deck. We are doing our best to work with the government. There is maize supplies from government and maize supplies from Grain Miller Association itself, our private imports. Part of it we had offered government 40,000 tons to say it is not prudent for us to import goods for the production of Zepnex and brewery and other snakes and maputi when we don't have roller mill. So we have given that to government, and the process of acquisition is underway.
Let's talk about your association, the Grain Millers Association. Who comprises that association?
We have 105 members, starting from the biggest miller to the smallest miller. We are a private member business organization. We are not part of government. Our members are in the business of producing milling meal flour, baking of sugar beans, salt, stock feeds, popcorn maize, and other related products, yes.
Now, talking about that grouping of 105 members, how many are actually active when we talk about the actual milling of the staple food?
Well, everyone is active. Everyone is active the fact that they are millers, they can't be millers and they are not producing. So they are active, but of course, albeit at different levels. Our members comprise or constitute 95% of the product into the market.
95%, which is pretty huge. And there have been calls that members are supposed to actually invest in the primary commodity. Has there been any strategy coming from your members to actually see to it that they come up with some schemes that will actually ensure that they have enough grain in the country, from the country?
Well, it's important that we recognize the fact that production of maize is everyone's responsibility. And we come at the end of the chain. Having said that, I will chronicle what we have done so far since 2015. We have funded or pre-funded Command Agriculture to the tune of $300 million, both for the production of wheat and maize. This entailed us mobilizing finances and pay before harvest so that the farmers can be paid quicker and on time to allow them to roll over to the next season. The funding cannot be a GMAZ issue. It should be a coordinated issue, matter through central government. And at the moment, it has been handed over to the banks. And I don't think, with respect, that the banks are better placed to take us to the greater heights that we were in 2016-17 in terms of wheat and maize production. Because when Command Agriculture came, the banks were still there. Now we have stopped this program to go back to the banks. And in my view, government is losing money in importing grain, naturally. It's not on a recovery basis. And we now have to choose to say, should we lose money importing grain, or should we lose money on a Command Agriculture setting, which also empowers our local farmers, our local industries? Grain is it's a staple food, and it gives rise to the constitutional right of everyone to get grain. It's like going to a police station. You must find the police station must be operating, but it can't operate or funded by fines or anything else. It has to operate from taxpayers' money. So the same. And as an industry, we feel that upon reflection, the Command Agriculture model must come back, of course, with the minor changes that, or certain hygienic issues that need to be attended to.
Let's talk about the hygienic issues in the next segment, where we are focusing on the country's staple food, maize. Join us then. Welcome back. We are focusing on the country's staple crop, maize, and of course a roller mill, as Zimbabweans at each and every time stampede for this scarce commodity. With me is Mr. Tafadzwa Msarara, the chair of the Grain Millers Association, GMAZ. Now, before we went to the break, you were articulating the Command Agriculture program under the ambit of government before it was then handed over to the banks. What could have been the reasons to have government let go of this very important fund and leave it in the auspices of banks?
Well, I can only speculate. There was a lot of political posturing, accusations and all kind of stuff. You don't want fights where capital is involved. Capital is very coward. To me, the bank's arrangement will not work. And here's the reasons. Sekur Kushlanga, they wouldn't want to loan or to have a loan with a bank, because they knows that in the event of a default, he is the head of cattle will go. And the conditions are tough, the issues of interest rates and everything else. But with Command Agriculture, it was easier for people to voluntarily and willingly go and access the inputs. Right. And where there's a drought or another mishap, yields are low, government was flexible, because it is the same government that gave them the land. Now, people are keen to go back to their government whenever there are problems, and the conditions of borrowing or of accessing the inputs are more friendlier than the bank situation.
And is that not a problem? Because there are reports that people took advantage of that flexibility and in the end it was now a lose-lose situation.
That is a hygienic issue that I said we need to address. One is that there's need to address the issue of timely distribution of inputs. Secondly, the proper usage of inputs. I think at one time there was a debate whether to criminalize abuse of inputs, and some people were arrested, and then lawyers started to argue to say it's a civil issue. We really need to look at that, to say going forward, how can we come up with sanctions to deal with the people who abuse inputs? How can we come up with deterrent measures? It's an issue for debate. Then, of course, the second issue is how can we encourage farmers to achieve a certain minimum yield per hectare of maize and wheat, so that they are able to pay back their debt and also have surplus for their own incomes.
As GMAZ, you highlighted that you did put in 300 million towards Command Agriculture. Could you still not replicate that same gesture, probably in a different setting, if you are not confident of the banking setup? Obviously, I'm sure there are certain farmers that you know who are master farmers, and those that have proven beyond doubt that they are pushing the national interest.
We can't work alone. We need government in terms of farmer identification. We need government in terms of agronomic services, the extension services. They're very key. We need GMB in terms of bringing in and buying the grain and storing it. What we can encourage is that we at Command Agriculture, and for whatever reasons, we have deliberately blinded ourselves to the successes of the greater yields that the country got. We have narrowed now to one or two individuals that we are blaming. Instead of saying, let's look at the whole program, which areas needs to be attended to. I'll tell you, European countries, whenever there's a bumper yield, right? Sometimes the government goes and buy that grain, the excess, and donate it, so that it does not affect the next season, right? That's government intervention. In the first world, even if you look at the EU policy on agriculture, it speaks to directing government to use fiscus to intervene and save farmers, to ensure that the food is there on the table. And the grain and fuel all over the world, there's always government that comes in. The American system on fuel is clear. When the lower prices are low, they go and buy. When the prices are high, they take that reserve and give to the people as a way of managing prices and make sure that we cushion. So because it is a right, it's foolhardy for anyone to think that we can run maize and wheat 100% on commercial lines, on recovery lines. That would be very difficult. More so, we have climate change. Farmers have to be cushioned. Everyone wants product from the millers, and we want the grain from the farmers. So we've got bigger issues that we're facing. Now we've got COVID, the lockdown. Our shipments are now slowed down because the countries that we get this grain have also closed down. Their infrastructure, they can't ship. The ships bring grain to this part of especially to Beira. They've got stations they pass through. Every time they pass those stations, they are put into quarantine. Now, this again tells us that we need to be self-sufficient in food production. We are importing grain more than other countries which are at war. It's unfortunate. Syria had a ravaging war, and they never imported wheat in their first 2 years because they had a 4-year cover for their staple food. But we are a peaceful country. We rely on imports. Now, with all this geopolitics that happens, these problems of the world that happens, you end up seeing that borders are closed. Even those ones to help us are unable to help us because they are now staying at home and we don't have grain. Why is it Zimbabwe has got the poorest stock in the country, in Southern Africa in terms of grain supplies? You see, because we are not investing enough. If you look at Malawi, NGOs have moved in to assist farmers. The World Bank has moved in to assist the farmers. Zambia, it is the same situation. Farmers get loans external. Now, given the Zimbabwe situation where we don't have that support, where should it come from? It should come from fiscals. Government has to make do that. Exposing farmers to commercial loans is a disaster, and it won't work, and it's not working. Look at the uptake of this of the funding. It's currently very low. So we need to revisit that as a country and say, will the commercial route work? And who would want to risk their house, get a loan to feed the country, and if there's a problem like what we are having, then what happens?
Well, the big question is on subsidy, and where should subsidy be given to, at the primary level or at the end of the value chain, that is with the millers? Join us in the third and final segment. Welcome back. We are focusing on maize and milling in Zimbabwe, and with us is GMAZ Chair, Mr. Tafadzwa Msarara. Now, Chair, before we went to the break, you were talking about how agriculture should be funded, and currently commercial lines will not cut it for Zimbabwe. The government introduced a subsidy for roller mill. And the big question, before we get into the actual subsidy for roller mill itself, looking at it from a macro perspective, should we be seeing subsidies at the primary level or at the end of the value chain where GMAZ is pegged?
If you go by international best practice, subsidies must be given at the farming level, so that the output of the product is actually low and enables us to process the grains and come up with final products that are affordable to consumers. But you may recall that the subsidies policy that government came up was a reaction to the complaints that were raised at the Kadoma youth conference. It was not even in our budget. It was a reaction to an urgent situation that had happened. And government wants to evolve that subsidy into a coupons system. But let's talk about the current subsidy. The current subsidy stipulates that we shall sell at a loss to consumers at $63 per 10 kg. And government will give us $72 per every pack of 10 kg. We have to claim and we have to sell to licensed retailers who are tax compliant and or sellers. That has been the case now. There has been some few delays in the payment of subsidy, but largely we want to commend the Minister of Finance. Funds has been coming. And it's a good thing that milling is given at the $70. But if you are to run that and compute it using the current black market rate, it comes to $10 or $0.15 a pocket. That's the cheapest maize meal in the country. And if we are to ensure everyone gets it, we must go full-blown in production of milling meal. Now, if the maize is cheap and the supplies are low, black market emerges. And it explains some of the unfortunate instances of black market sales that crop up here and there.
But the big question now is, since you insist on working closely with government as a private BMO, what measures are you also putting in place to ensure that at least the black market is thwarted in the interest of Zimbabweans? We do hear that there are some that are accessing the subsidized roller mill and they are reselling it at a premium. And obviously those brands can be followed up. They can be seen in the streets, they can be seen in the tuck shops. Are there any mechanisms for monitoring and dealing with those truant operators?
Well, you can only do so much. Last year we employed 200 monitors, price monitors. I think you saw them. Their mandate was simply to go around to ensure prices are at the price that we agreed at, and all stocks are sold in the shops that we have sold to. But for some reason, the Competition Tariff Commission, in its wisdom, and perhaps the lack of it, stopped that program. So at the moment, we can only supply to a shop, and what they do with it, nobody knows. The beauty of this program that we had started was that we wanted to do self-regulation as a value chain players, without the police, without the state. The moment the police and the state comes in, it appears price control. It does not augur well with our narrative of Zimbabwe is open for business. So sometimes we want players to regulate themselves. And you can arrest someone. Either within 48 hours, they have a bail, and the process continues. So it's not effective. Ourselves, we would say, if a retailer violates, we stop supplies. So you tell me which retailer would thrive without middlemeal, flour, salt, sugar beans? No one, you see. So it was going to encourage compliance. But the Competition Tariff Commission perhaps called them one day here to explain why they stopped that program. Because the moment we stopped, the price is spiked, the price of our products is spiked, and the black market emerged. And this explains again why we are here.
But also you should obviously have members that also have been playing bad card. Have you censored them? What have you done as a way of sort of dealing with that speculative behavior?
Well, we were 105 members, and the reason why we came up with monitoring was to enforce compliance first by our members, and secondly by our retailers and wholesalers. Right. Remember, black market is very difficult to follow. At what point did we drop the ball? Is it at the retailer or it is the miller? Because all you find is the products on the streets. So who started to sell it above the gazetted price is a challenge. We don't deny that some of our members might not have complied with it, but that's why we came up with a monitoring to ensure our members comply.
But in these trying times, we do find millers, and I'm not sure if they're your members, but you do find millers opting to actually produce the super refined mill, as opposed to pushing out more volumes on the roller mill, which will then be accessible to ordinary Zimbabweans.
Yes, there's nothing wrong in producing super refined. We have two lines of imports. One is government imports, maize imports, and those ones have been specifically dedicated for roller mill. Then we've got our own imports where members can use super refined. So the issues of acquitting your stocks that would have taken from GMB before you take another load are very strict. The millers are complying on that one. But we have our own maize that we are bringing to make super refined, especially for the higher income bracket.
Mr. Msarara, thank you so much for finding time to come through to the studio.
Thank you. Pleasure is mine, sir.
The guest was Mr. Tafadzo Msarara, the chair of the Grain Millers Association of Zimbabwe, GMAZ, as we were talking about roller mill. And I know that a lot of comments are actually coming through as the program is going, and hopefully we will have Mr. Msarara coming back to actually respond to the issues that you, the viewer, is raising. My name is Tawanda Gudlanga. Do join me again next time as we continue to give you hot issues on Economic Forum. Until then, it's pleasant viewing.